President Trump, attempting to corner his closest ally, unleashes a punishing trade war on Canada. It's a show of overwhelming economic force designed to bring a nation to its knees. But instead of bowing, Ottawa is preparing to push back, not just with tariffs, but with a hidden weapon buried deep in its northern shield. Suddenly, the bully finds himself in a bind, his entire strategy at risk of backfiring spectacularly. How did Canada turn a vast, frozen wilderness into the most powerful weapon in a trade war? For a century, the United States and Canada were more than allies. They were partners in building a continental economic superpower. Their relationship was forged in the earth itself, in the iron ore, nickel, and timber that flowed south from Canada to fuel American factories and the finished goods that flowed north. This deep integration, particularly in resources and heavy industry, created a shared prosperity that was the envy of the world. It was a partnership built on a simple, unspoken promise. We have what you need, and you have what we need. But this foundation of trust was shattered by the ideology of America First. The Trump administration began to view this deep integration not as a strength, but as a vulnerability. The flow of Canadian resources was reframed as an unfair advantage that hollowed out American industry. The first shots in this new conflict were fired at the very heart of this historic partnership: steel and aluminum. Citing national security concerns, the White House imposed heavy tariffs, treating its closest ally like a hostile threat. This wasn't just a policy change, it was a fundamental betrayal of the century-old promise. The era of predictable cooperation was over, replaced by a new reality of confrontation, mistrust, and economic warfare. The stage was set for a standoff where old loyalties meant nothing. President Trump's strategy was designed to corner Canada and force its submission. Having already imposed heavy duties on steel and aluminum, his administration escalated the trade war, threatening to expand punitive tariffs to nearly every sector of the Canadian economy. The White House was operating on the core belief that Canada's economic dependence on the US market was its Achilles heel, a vulnerability that could be ruthlessly exploited. The goal was to inflict maximum economic pain, to create a crisis so profound that Ottawa would have no choice but to offer sweeping concessions. This was not a negotiation among partners. It was a hostile takeover bid. The Trump administration was using the full weight of its economic power to try and bully its closest ally into a new relationship based not on mutual respect, but on American dominance. The public justification was a constantly shifting narrative, but the private message was clear: capitulate or face economic ruin. The Trump administration was confident that this campaign of shock and awe would work. They believed that under the crushing weight of tariffs, Canada would quickly buckle, offering up concessions on everything from trade balances to dairy quotas. It was a high-stakes gamble, predicated on the idea that in a contest of pure economic strength, Canada simply couldn't win. Washington saw this as a straightforward test of power, and they were certain that they held all the cards. They were about to discover that Canada was holding a hidden ace. As Washington was focused on its tariff assault, a quiet but powerful counter-strategy was taking shape in Ottawa. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, knew he couldn't win a conventional trade war, so he changed the game. Instead of focusing on defense, he went on the offense, leveraging a different kind of power buried deep within the Canadian shield. This is the Ring of Fire, a massive, mineral-rich region in northern Ontario. It's one of the world's most significant untapped sources of the very ingredients that power the 21st century economy: the nickel, copper, and platinum essential for electric vehicles, and the cobalt and lithium that are the lifeblood of modern battery technology. In a world desperate to shift to green energy, these weren't just rocks, they were the keys to the future. Carney's government made a bold, strategic pivot. They announced they were fast-tracking the development of the Ring of Fire, backed by $1 billion federal investment in roads and infrastructure. They were sending a clear signal. Canada was taking sovereign control of its strategic resources. Then came the masterstroke. through carefully worded statements, Canada's energy minister began to float the idea that Ottawa was considering countermeasures, including potential export controls on its critical minerals, if the U.S. continued its aggression. This sentiment was echoed loudly by provincial leaders like Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who publicly urged Carney to use this leverage, even suggesting a 50% tariff on U.S. goods or stockpiling the minerals as a weapon. This wasn't just a defensive move, it was a calculated power play. Canada was reminding Washington that trade is a two-way street, and the flow of resources north to south could be turned off. Suddenly, the entire dynamic of the conflict flipped. President Trump's attempt to corner Canada had spectacularly backfired. He had started a trade war over yesterday's industries, like steel, only to find himself in a position where he might have to beg for access to the resources needed for tomorrow's industries. He was now the one in a bind. To continue his economic assault was to risk cutting off the U.S. from the most stable and secure source of the minerals essential for its own green energy and high-tech ambitions. Carney had turned Canada's natural resources into political power, transforming his country from a victim into a strategic gatekeeper. The bully had been caught in a trap of his own making. Even with a brilliant long-term strategy, Prime Minister Carney's defiance could not shield Canada from the immediate economic pain of Trump's tariffs. For the communities built around the steel and aluminum industries, the trade war was not a geopolitical chess match. It was a direct threat to their way of life. These are towns where the mill is the heart of the local economy, where generations of families have made a good living. The U.S. tariffs threw this stable world into chaos, threatening the viability of the plants and the jobs of thousands of Canadian workers. For a steelworker in Hamilton, the political maneuvering in Washington translated into a terrifying real-world uncertainty about whether they could continue to provide for their family. The pain was just as acute in the highly integrated auto sector. In cities like Windsor, which sits in the shadow of Detroit, the economies are so intertwined they are practically one. The tariffs on auto parts created logistical nightmares and imposed massive new costs, putting Canadian suppliers at a sudden disadvantage. While the government's focus on the Ring of Fire was a promise of a new future, it offered little immediate comfort to a factory worker whose job was at risk today. They were the ones bearing the short-term cost of a long-term fight for Canada's economic sovereignty. On the American side of the border, the blowback from Trump's strategy was not about the pain of today, but the threat to tomorrow. The United States is locked in a high-stakes global race against China to dominate the industries of the future: green technology, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. Winning that race depends on a massive, reliable, and secure supply of critical minerals. These are the essential building blocks for the electric vehicle batteries, wind turbines, and semiconductors that will define 21st century economic power. The great American vulnerability is that it doesn't mine enough of these minerals itself and relies on a fragile global supply chain often controlled by adversaries. Canada was supposed to be the answer to this critical national security problem. As a stable, democratic, next-door neighbor with some of the world's largest untapped reserves, it was the perfect partner to help build a secure North American mines-to-manufacturing supply chain. But by launching an aggressive trade war, President Trump jeopardized that entire future. The hint of Canadian export controls sent a chill through America's most innovative boardrooms. How can a company invest billions in a new battery gigafactory in Arizona if it can't be sure it will have access to the Canadian nickel and lithium needed to operate it? The attempt to protect yesterday's industries was now actively threatening the growth of tomorrow's, a colossal strategic blunder that left American innovators caught in the crossfire. A president's attempt to corner his closest ally has backfired, met by a sophisticated counter-strategy that leverages the very resources America needs for its future. The brute force of tariffs has been checked by the quiet power of critical minerals, leaving the world's most successful partnership fractured and its future uncertain. Both nations now face a choice: retreat into economic nationalism or find a new way to rebuild the trust that once made them an unstoppable force. In the race to define the future, will North America win together, or will both nations lose by trying to go it alone? Are you American or Canadian? Share your story and your perspective in the comments below.